Now, I don't want to come across as calling anybody out nationally, but there's a case
Is this the
that
one
is
in Baltimore?
involving, yes,
Let me read it. Let me read it because I have it
come
here.
on.
I had it here for you. So
All right.
Baltimore's former top prosecutor, is facing decades in prison after
Yes.
Tuesday, jurors convicted her of mortgage fraud. We're talking about Marilyn Mosby, who was a hero for a minute because of the rough
Absolutely.
ride of Freddie Gray. We were very optimistic about her ability to hold these police officers in Baltimore accountable. It did not work out. She served as the state's attorney for Baltimore from 2015 to 2022. Well, she was
Mm.
convicted on Tuesday of one of two counts of federal mortgage fraud in part of a wider federal corruption case centered on allegations stemming from the COVID-19 pandemic, for which Mosby was already found guilty of perjury. So the jury unanimously agreed that Mosby lied about the source. So here's what she did. She took $5,000 that allegedly was gifted to her at closing by her husband. But what really happened was she gave her husband $5,000 and then he gave her the $5,000 back. So she lied on the form that it was a gift, but it was money that came from her 401k.
Mm.
And so she transferred it back to herself. Mosby, 44, found guilty on these two counts. That penalty carries 5 years in prison. And on Tuesday, the verdict means that Mosby is also now facing that perjury count 5 years. She's facing 30 years. 30 years. And she was hit with originally 4 felony counts in 2022 when allegations came about. And there's 2 cases here. One is she claimed hardship stemming from the coronavirus, that allowed her to take money from her 401k. She claimed hardship because she wanted to buy a boat. So she took $40,000 from her own 401k and said it was financial hardship. But she got a $10,000 pay raise that same year, bringing her salary up to $248,000. So they were like, how's that hardship? She withdrew the money for the down payment on a property in Florida. She said would be her second home, and therefore that would lower the interest rates. But even that was found to be not true. So there was like, I'm going to say this, Lou,
Mm.
people do this every day and they never get caught. And
Thank you.
this seems very minor, and it does
Hmm.
seem like she was targeted, as Trump did billions of dollars of lies on property. And I know people are saying, I've done this, you know. Well,
Well,
what's the
Karen, that's what it really, really troubled me because I believe in the rule of law, but not on a minuscule transgression involving five thousand
$5,000?
dollars. Give me a freaking break. Come on now. You mean our federal prosecutors have got nothing better to do than go after somebody who embellished on their mortgage application? But here's raises the point. And I say this, Karen, a lot of times. You never know. You never know. So you cannot put yourself in a position. And as you climb that ladder professionally, career-wise, you're more exposed. And, the $5,000 piece, and I know people do a lot of, finagling when they're trying to buy a house, and, and maybe a little bit here is not quite accurate. But I always remind people, just as you had, a conviction of mortgage fraud, one count, 30 years, potentially.
She's looking at 30 years.
That's significant. Now, I mean, Marilyn Mosby, she's not going to do no 30 years.
No, she's not. She's probably not.
First
But
time offender.
damn,
But
Lou.
the exposure, and then you got the other situation. Now, here's the other thing we got to bring up is during this second trial involving mortgage fraud, her husband, Nick Mosby, took the stand and testified. I lied to my wife. The only reason that she didn't disclose, and at this point they were focusing in on the tax debt that wasn't part of the application. I believe it's around $60,000, $70,000. The only reason is because I told her that I had an installment agreement. And she believed me. Now, if the jury's listening to this, and of course, here's what the prosecutor said. Well, look at the source. This is the same guy that reported $18,000 as a charitable contribution when there was no possible way that he could contribute that much in that tax year.
Integrity as it relates to this case with Marilyn Mosby, who was facing 30 years in prison for getting a $5,000 transfer of payment, not paying taxes, and lying about it. Perjury, I think. I think it's a bit much, but it also speaks to, like, is there a way we could avoid something like this, Lou? Yes.
Yeah, again, if we go back to this whole notion about, I say to people, Karen, in this day and age, there are no secrets. There are no secrets. Technology today, not to mention when you involved in any kind of high-level investigation. See, I consider a tax audit to be an investigation. People don't realize the Internal Revenue Service has summons authority, administrative summons authority. What that means is that they can access your bank records without your freaking consent. So folks say, well, I did X, Y, Z. How would they know? Oh, they've got ways to not to mention, they can interview folks. They can interview your neighbors. Sometimes they do what's known as an asset valuation, where they look at what did you start off with at one point in time? What did you end up with at another point in time? And they back into how much income you would have had to have generated during that period of time. And if you reported considerably less, then they got a tax evasion case. Now, I'm just giving you all these examples, but we're talking about the Marilyn Mosby case. I come back to this, Karen. I said, listen, if you give her the benefit of the doubt, this was her first investment in a home.
Wow.
Now, folks will say, yeah, well, if it's your first time, you're a lawyer, you should know what you don't know, and you should go out and seek advice and counsel, all right? But I can envision someone getting so hyped and excited. And, during that pandemic era, between the PPP loan and folks thinking they're getting free money and so forth and so on, I mean, there was, just something going on in gossip and social media, and people were hopping on the bandwagon. They weren't thinking about whether they were complying with the law, the letter of the law. Not to mention, by the way, the letter of the law was not that clear as it relates to what constitutes a hardship. So, you bring that together along with the fact that you got a high-profile defendant. Prosecutors, it is selective prosecution. You don't want to necessarily prosecute Joe the plumber, because that's not going to deter anybody. But when you prosecute the state's attorney, then that's a whole nother story.
But I go back to this. I feel like we know when we're doing something, and we were talking off mic, especially when you're buying your first home, you get hit with so many, they'll tell you need to have this much money, and then they tell you need this much more money, and then they tell you you need this much more money, and this is not adding up, and then the interest rate. And so you're pulling from so many different places. So I'm going to give you money, you give it back to me, and we're not thinking that's illegal, because I know people who have done this.
Absolutely. It's pretty common.
Yes. Well, she's facing 30 years. And then it's perjury, because again, if you wrote it on a federal document and you signed it, now it's so we again have to be so much more aware. And somebody like a Marilyn Mosby, to your point, she's in the crosshairs. You got to be pristine, which is why it's wild to me that people think they can get away with things when you're in the public eye.
Especially, I mean, you can think about those that have been prosecuted, and Wesley Snipes always comes to mind. He's like the quintessential, and high profile folk, professional athletes. I mean, you had a situation where a number of retired NBA players were involved in a scam where they were milking I think it was the health insurance for retired players, and submitting phony invoices. I mean, I just look at it this way, Karen. There's so many business opportunities out there. And so if if you're struggling or if you just want to enhance what you have, let's consider some of those business opportunities. And they're not all high tech. Some business opportunities are low tech. And so I just encourage people, as you pointed out when you said, Lou, let's talk about integrity. The integrity thing is important. Say, what are you doing when nobody's watching? Well, I'm here to tell you, with technology, they're watching you all the time. They can recreate your activities for the last 2 years, just by tracking your phone, right? So the idea really is, in this day and age, and I think your central point is this, Karen, it pays to be compliant. And if you don't know what that involves, what they say, ask somebody to know.
I was going to say, have a Lou Hut in your life to make sure your ass is covered.